Welcome back to Riftlab, where we talk all things Riftbound. Kai'Sa has been dominating the tournament scene with its spell-heavy and aggro deck. Today we will be diving into how to play around this deck, what plays to look out for, and some suggestions on which cards to consider adding to your own deck to help counter this menace. Before we continue, please make sure you have liked the video and subscribed to the channel. It helps us massively and allows us to continue making the very best content. The average meta Kai'Sa deck is now shown on the screen. Here you can see all the units and spells that this deck has available to it. The way Kai'Sa wins is threefold: the strength of her low cost units, which can also accelerate, access to many draw abilities keeping her hand fairly consistent, and her high damaging spells, which also don't need to target units on a battlefield. Kai'Sa wants to control the score by conquering rather than holding. The majority of her units manage this by support spells like Cleave, Stupefy, and Hexray, removing your small might units in the process. She could then defend with spells such as Smokescreen, Void Seeker, and Retreat. These spells will be something you need to consider when either pushing into an occupied or even empty battlefield. A common misunderstanding is that Kai'Sa just wants to shoot you with spells, but in fact that is the support element of her arsenal. Her biggest strength comes from combining this with low cost, high might units and access to mass accelerated units as well. Remember, as stated, this deck struggles to hold, so will want to play their accelerated units or build up their base ready to push in the next turn. The way to look at how Kai'Sa is playing is with what runes they have access to. You need to know what they can play and when. For example, if they have 5 runes up and decide to play Kai'Sa in base whilst holding 1 up, they will most likely have a retreat in hand to protect it. If they have 6 runes and cast a 1-cost spell, they will most likely be playing Darius next, which will then come in ready as it's the second card played that turn. Once the Kai'Sa player reaches 8 runes, the next turn they have access to their big spell, Time Warp. This needs to be considered when playing, so the more knowledge you have on a Kai'Sa deck, the more you can plan your turn accordingly. Let's go over some strong combos to look out for. Falling Star and Stupefy. If you have a 4 might unit and a 3 might unit, this can still be Falling Starred along with using Stupefy, as it reduces the 4 might unit down to 3. When your opponent is on 6 or 7 points and have 10 runes up, then moves into an empty battlefield with a unit, they may be playing around a Time Warp, so make sure you take it down beforehand. If you have 3 or more units in play, you will also open yourself up to a Cathian Rain. This even means that if you have units in your base, they can still be hit multiple times. Kai'Sa players love to develop their base as well, so if you do slow down the tempo, they can develop their own base with their 2-cost units, which include Noxus Hopefuls, as they tend to cost 2 less if they've played another unit that turn, which is exceptionally frustrating to deal with. Let's cover Kai'Sa's weaknesses. Kai'Sa could struggle to deal with decks which can actually keep up with her aggro. This includes decks like Annie, which can also play a number of different accelerated units, or things like Sneaky Deckhand, which can move straight onto a battlefield. Decks which can also ramp up to the late game quickly, such as Misfortune Aurora or even Yi, can really hurt this deck because of the quickness you can get high might units on the board. Another weakness is counter spells. Kai'Sa has no way of playing around counter spells. If you have a Defy or a Wind Wall, it simply goes off and stops some of their best spells, such as Time Warp and a Cathian Rain. Let's now cover some cards I would recommend adding to your deck depending on the archetype. I recommend building your deck with 2 to 3 Defies and having at least 1 Wind Wall in your sideboard. You can also buff your units out of the damage range with Discipline and Unguards. For order, I would consider 3 Hidden Blades, as this makes a Thousand Tail Watcher or Darius harder to push into your held battlefields. Grand Stratagem is also great for holding or pushing late game. Mind has access to Singularity, which helps you remove those pesky backfield 4+ might units, and Stupefy helps reduce the might of those units moving into your battlefield. You also have access to Dr. Mundo, which is exceptionally tough for the Kai'Sa player to take down. Chaos has access to a lot of counters, notably Fight or Flight and Ride the Wind. Most Chaos decks should be running 3 of these, as they play around a lot of Kai'Sa's strengths. This includes pushing back her units, or moving one of your units to the other battlefield and conquering in their turn. Fury fights fire with fire. You have access to Void Seekers and Falling Stars yourself, so hit them where it hurts with their own abilities. You can also add some Noxus Hopefuls, which Kai'Sa struggles to deal with due to the high might and low cost. Finally, Body. I recommend cards like Sabotage, which can really hamper those key spells in Kaiser's hand, and while sideboarding Unyielding Spirit and bringing that in, which is exceptionally strong at simply stopping any damage from a spell or ability that turn. With your mulligan at the beginning of the game, I recommend keeping at least one of these counters in hand. This could be a Defy or a Unyielding Spirit. Make sure you have a unit as well to open up with, but remember, if your opponent does have 1 rune up, you need to be able to play around a Hexray early game. If they have 3 runes up, you will also need to play around Voidseeker. Any ramp cards that you have to get to the late game quicker, you should also keep in your hand. In terms of your sideboard, from game 2, simply swap out some units or spells you feel may not be needed. For example, against Kaiser, you may not want some high might units unless it has Deflect. This could be a unit like Lee Sin, but bringing in a few Kianas or an Unyielding Spirit may be stronger to have in your deck. Do not take any aggro units out, as you will need to keep the pressure on your opponent, but sometimes certain cards which don't work as well into Kaiser, like Cull the Weak, which may not get much value due to the mass small might units they have access to, can be sideboarded out for something more efficient. Hopefully this basic guide will help you really consider what to do when playing Kaiser. If you have a cool combo or idea, we would love to hear from it in the comments below.